Wow, we got quiet. It's not on. Okay, so welcome everybody to Brown Bag Lunch. It's good to see everybody here today. We have lots of things going on. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day. I want to thank Alana Flagel. She decorates for us. And because I messed up, yes, thank you to Alana. Because I messed up, she decorated twice. Because she came and she did it Saturday and then found out the building had been rented and there was going to be a party here. So she had to undecorate and then she came back and decorated again.
Oh my.
So, and she still speaks to me. That's the amazing, that's the amazing thing. So if you see Lana, please thank her for just making things a little special for us. We have one card going around today, a birthday card for Vi Yeager. So a happy birthday to Vi Yeager. And then I'm supposed to tell you that we have some bunches of daffodils today that are part of the Relay for Life. They were bought as a donation by Kathy Bailey. Kathy's been in the hospital, but she's home now. She's doing much better, but she's not with us today. But she sent the daffodils, and so there's a couple bunches, 3 or 4 bunches, 4 bunches of daffodils in the kitchen if you'd like to take home some daffodils. First come, first serve. Okay. So, but those are for the Relay of Life, and we thank Kathy Bailey for that.
My birthday yesterday too.
Oh, we didn't know.
I didn't tell anybody.
Okay.
That's okay.
Add you to our list. Well, happy birthday. We're going to sing to you.
Oh.
I see Alice. She's Johnny on the spot. Okay, well, Alice is getting ready, so we don't rush her. I just wanted to tell you, if you didn't see the poster from Clover Ridge, and Clover Ridge didn't come today, understandably. It's called Keys to Dream, concert with Ann Knight. So it's for Ann Knight. It's at Clover Ridge this coming Friday, March 20th at 2:30. And so to honor Ann and all her years of playing the piano. So everybody's invited to Clover Ridge, 2:30 on Friday. You know, I don't know quite what all they're doing.
But she is going to play.
That's what I heard.
Oh, good.
Could you put that on your Facebook page?
Oh, well, we should do that.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And I also understand that right after the program today, everybody's invited to go to the Timber Center?
Timber City?
Timber City?
No.
Timber Lanes. Timber Center
Lanes.
at Timber Lanes, okay? For a St. Patrick's Day party. So everybody when they get done here, please go over there. That will be real. We were wondering if they were having green beer, but that may just be a rumor. We don't know that for sure. Wanted to tell you that Brown Bag Lunch next week on the 24th is going to be Michelle Turner, and she's going to do another of the 250th birthday of our country Brown Bag Lunches, and she's going to be talking about 250 years of gardening in Jackson County. And now I know that her plan was to get heritage garden seeds that everybody could take some home to plant in their garden that came from things from 250 years ago. So anyway, I'm just going to tell you before we sing that I appreciate Sue Mayberry doing our program today. You can see what it's going to be about. This was a rough and tumble place back in the day, and I guess we need not to remember that. So anyway, thank you to Alice, and we'll sing Happy Birthday. Thank you. And I could have said Carrie. Happy birthday, Carrie.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Hello.
So I apologize kind of for the dark subject matter. I know the one I had the last time was bigamy and now this one, but I've been getting doing a lot of research now in the newspapers, and they print more negative things than they do positive things. They did back in the day, they're still doing that today too. which is unfortunate. And then I came across this, I don't mean to offend anybody, but I read that if you don't read the newspapers, you're uninformed, and if you do read them, you're misinformed.
I think that's it.
Mystery, mayhem, and murder. In 1960, two cousins hung themselves. Two girls, cousins aged 15 and 16, hung themselves in Jackson County recently on account of loving the same man. And this appeared in the Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania paper. So, I mean, I'm finding more information from papers that aren't even from around here, this stuff. And so this excerpt, though, was in, I had mentioned before, Genealogy Trails. That's a website of Jackson County, and there's a volunteer in particular, Mary Kay Krogman, that then transcribes and puts these on that site, and this is one of them. And then it said in parentheses, does anybody know the names? So I thought, I can find this out. I can go through Find a Grave, and I can find two girls that died on the same day, about that age. Couldn't do it. I found two, but they didn't die on the same day. So that's kind of a mystery yet, unless anybody knows. So if anybody knows any information on the stuff that I tell about, please raise your hand. A.D. Hitcher, missing, Denver, July 22nd, 1881. The Republican has the following. A.D. Hitcher of Andrew has been in the Black Hills and in Colorado for the last 4 years and has accumulated $20,000. And who was latterly employed as messenger by the Adams Express Company, is supposed to have been killed. His wife, who has been living at home in Andrew, arrived in Denver yesterday, and upon making inquiries, found that some time ago had passed since he had been heard of, and that he no longer was in the employ of the Express Company. So that was in the Santa Fe Daily newspaper. Mrs. Bradway, the wife of a farmer near Maquoketa in Jackson County, went into a bedroom on June 28, 1888, supposedly to just change her dress. And a few minutes later, and again this is a quote from the article, a 10-year-old daughter went outside and looking through the bedroom window saw her mother and her sister in flames on the bed. And so she ran to the field to get her dad. And it was said that by the time her dad and all the neighbors got back, the house was nearly burnt to the ground, and her mother and daughter had perished. So the mother was the daughter of Hiram and Sarah McCarran, and I was trying to find, because that McCarran name seems very familiar. They were a prominent family.
I believe they owned the Excelsior newspaper for a while, and I believe that Mrs. McCarran is the person that gave the name Timber City to Maquoketa.
Oh, maybe that's where I've heard that. So the 4-year-old daughter who died, her name was Anna, and her mother, Mary Eulalia, was just 37 years old when she died. And in the photo you can see a picture. The mother and the daughter share the same stone. So the parents, they lived in Farmers Creek Township, and the father was a farmer. And then the daughter, Myrtle, who was probably 12 years old, not 10, I found her on okay, so then I found out about her, and when she grew up, she became a nurse. And what she chose to study was phrenology. And so I didn't know what phrenology was, but I looked it up. So it was a 19th century pseudoscience that involved studying the shape, size, and contour of the human skull to determine personality traits, intellect, and character. She married a doctor, and they divorced in 1930. Her brother served in the Civil War. But I wonder if why Myrtle went into that field, into that medical field. Maybe she was trying to get some answers as to what happened to her mother, if that was something, that was purposeful. I don't know. Then this is the one. At first I started doing a lot of search on this, and then I figured out, no, she wasn't from here, but everybody here was talking about it. So reported in the Daily Times, Mary Benham, she's lived 2 lives. A girl takes up a life that another laid down, and here's the story. A gentleman who arrived here today related the following incident as told to him on a train by a gentleman residing near Lamont, Iowa. The strange case of the girl is attracting much attention near Lamont. Her life will be studied at the summer meeting of the English, it's a cyclical society. She is Mary Benham, and she has lived 2 lives. The Benham family lived near a family named Cough. And so what had happened was this little girl happened to go into an epileptic seizure while the Coughs were visiting. And then when she came out of this seizure, she seemed to just have been totally changed. Her character, outwardly, she still looked the same, but, just totally. And she acted as if these people then that came to visit her were her parents. And so that was, was a little bit strange for them. And then they allowed her to go back to this other house with the parents, and they had lost their daughter. She also had had epilepsy, and they had lost her, I don't know, it was like maybe 15 or 16 years before, and she was about the same age as this Mary was now. And so when she gets to the house, she's saying, "Mother, where's my pink cape?" And, this other little girl that had died had a pink cape. And then she asked about Jip the dog, who had long, died, probably 8 years before that. And so there were just so many things that she talked about that she would have no knowledge of, or her parents wouldn't have had any knowledge of. And so the family let her live there. The father said, "Can let her live there for however long it takes, till maybe that will cure her and she'll get her memory back." And evidently, after 9 months, she turned back to her regular self. And went on to lead a normal life. And so this is a picture of her, Mary Lawrence Benham. And so this case was studied by the medical community, and there was a 54-page document that was published called the Waseca Wonder, which is where she was from. A narrative of startling phenomena occurring in the case of Mary Lawrence Benham. In this unusual 19th century case, the body of a 13-year-old girl appeared for some months to be possessed by the spirit of a girl who had died 12 years earlier. Basically, she lived the life of this other girl for 9 months and then returned to her family and went on to lead a normal life. May 11, 1900. John Cotton, a wealthy Sebula stockman, went to Chicago recently, and he's mysteriously disappeared. And this case may have been solved because he may have come back. I did find a John Cotton who died in 1917 that's buried in Sebula. So he's of the age that it could have been him, but then again, 17 years old, could have accumulated that much wealth? And I look back, and his father's name isn't John. So maybe they got the first name wrong. I don't know. Edna and Josephine Filter lost on Pikes Peak. And this article was in Walla Walla, Washington newspaper. Iowa girls lost trail in descending the mountain. Maquoketa, Iowa, July 21st, 1905. News from Colorado Springs says that Mrs. Edna and Josephine Filter of Maquoketa, who are visiting at Colorado Springs, are lost on Pikes Peak. They left Manitou Tuesday morning as members of a burro party of 30 and stopped at the halfway house to stay overnight. And so then the next morning, they decided, they got up early, they just thought they'd just come back by themselves. And that's when they got lost. But apparently they were found, because I did find in the census where they do appear at, later years. And Edna, the one that, I think these two women must have been, pretty brave, adventurous to do this to begin with. And her profession, she was a bricklayer with the gas company. So I thought that was an unusual profession for a woman in the day. That was in 1910, and then she married Leroy Grau in 1913. And they had a child, and they named her Josephine, probably after her sister. And then I did find where her sister showed up on censuses, so I do think that they both came back. And wouldn't you think that, parents then, when I find this listed on genealogy websites, that, I think that's kind of important. That'd be an important story. You'd think that somehow that would have gotten passed down. 1859. On Sunday night, I was going to look up how to pronounce that. Is it miscreants? Miscreants? Of Bellevue, actuated by a purely devilish spirit or mischief, amused themselves. What they did was they put tar on the doorknobs at various businesses, the railings of the courthouse, and on the doors of St. Paul's Church. And in the last named place, evening services were held, and the result was, in passing through those doors, a lot of the ladies and a few gentlemen almost got their clothes ruined by coming in contact with that tar. Mrs. Truman Hart feigned insanity just for the purpose of being confined in jail where her husband was. She succeeded admirably. The Sebula Gazette. I think that then they skedaddled after he got out. I can't find any more about this couple. 1885. On Monday morning, John Hinton was arrested on a charge of assault and battery on the person of Miss Emma Miller, wife of Charles Miller. He was brought before Justice Henry to answer for it. The Hinton and Miller families live in the brick block over the Hamley Meat Market. Now, would that building still be here, where the Hamley Meat Market was, do you think? If that one's gone, okay. Last Saturday night, Mrs. Miller went to the salvation meeting and left her baby in charge of Dolly Hinton, which is the daughter of the man that committed the assault. So Mrs. Miller, she didn't get home till after 10 o'clock. She's walking down this dark hallway, and John Hinton jumps out and grabs her. And she was so frightened that she screamed. So, she was very upset over it. John testified that he didn't have any bad intentions in doing that. And he had did similar things like that before to this woman, in front of other people. So, that makes it right, I guess. But the court, however, considered it worth a $5 fine and costs which he laid upon the defendant. And that was in the Jackson Sentinel, June 3rd, 1885. Fred Kelsaw, a merchant of Canton, Jackson County, has been indicted for arson. The Jackson County, Iowa grand jury indicted Fred Kelsaw, merchant and justice of the peace, which proved to be the leader of a gang of bandits. And that showed up in a paper in Oklahoma and also North Dakota. May 28, 1887, a woman horse thief was recently captured in Maquoketa. I don't think she was probably a native of this community. But. December 19, 1890, a few days ago, a woman appeared in the city going to the drugstores and would purchase bottles of chloroform. She would inhale the chloroform and become intoxicated. On Wednesday evening, she was taken to St. Luke's, where she got over the effect of the drug. And then what happened? They let her out. She did it again. And so then they got a physician involved. Anyway, when she was in the hospital, she gave her name as Mrs. B.V. McCaw. She said she lived with her father, who was a wealthy farmer living near Maquoketa, and that she was on her way to Des Moines to visit a friend. And this friend she had worked for. Anyway, this lady that was inhaling this stuff was just 25 years old. She said she had a husband somewhere, but she had nothing to do with them. So in the morning, what this town did, where she was at, they placed her on the Milwaukee train and sent her back to Maquoketa. Well, I don't know what happened after that, but I'd never heard of people doing that with chloroform. I thought that actually killed you, the chloroform. May 1st, 1891, Sheriff McCaffrey of Maquoketa was in the city last night with an insane man for the hospital. He had to sit up with that man all night, and he was pretty tired when he left with him for Independence the next morning. March 7th, 1890. The Ellinghouse murder case is about to come up for trial here. Ellinghouse, a 6-footer, was a bartender in a Bellevue saloon. So they said this little crippled man came into the saloon and wanted to buy a round for everybody. When it came time to pay, he didn't give the bartender enough. And the bartender asked for, the right amount of money. And he refused, and so the bartender leaped over the counter and he jumped onto this man and he crushed his liver, thereby killing him. I don't know how that trial ended up, but I would think he would have gotten convicted. And there was a number of crimes cases that had to do with prohibition, and this is one of them. $5,000 suit. Special telegram to the Evening Gazette. The Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul this morning brought a suit in the United States court at this place for $5,000 in damages against 2 Maquoketa prohibitionists for breaking open a car containing liquor in transit on Sunday. This is a test case. So I don't know what the outcome was of that. Now we get to murder. Kate Cabin was the daughter of Shep and Phoebe Cabin. Kate suffered from St. Vitus's dance, which is a rare neurological disorder caused by an autoimmune reaction to a strep infection. And it affects children and adolescents, and it causes jerky and uncontrollable movements. And then it also affects your mind a little bit, acting inappropriately, maybe laughing out loud when you shouldn't be, and crying, at the wrong time. So she was afflicted with this. So anyway, in the article, it says Kate Cabin was murdered. An article appeared in the Jackson Sentinel, May 13, 1886, telling of the tragedy that on May 3rd, Miss Kate Cabin left her home and was found on Wednesday morning in the Ralston Cave, shot through the heart. The Ralston Cave is half a mile or so from her home and is situated on the farm of Mill and Ralston, the Canton and Maquoketa mail carrier. The cave is like hundreds of others which Jackson County abounds, but this one was unusually large, and they said that you could turn a carriage with horses around in it. The body of the girl was in a good state of preservation with the air in the cave, being so cold, but some wild animals had gotten to her. I won't describe that, but Miss Kate was 25 years of age and had been afflicted since infancy with this disease. And of late years, her mind seemed to be affected. On the day of the tragedy, she had packed up a suitcase and was going to go away. And so then her mother didn't want her to go away, and the girl wasn't listening to her. So she said, I'm going to go get your dad. He's going to tell you that you can't go away. And by the time that, they both got back, she was already gone. And so then at first they didn't worry too much about it because she did this before. She'd go stay with friends for 2 or 3 days. But then the Cabin family found out that Kate wasn't with the people that she usually goes to visit. And so then they began a search. And that was the same day then that her sister, Mrs. McCullough, found the body. And her sister had kind of a clue because from the fact that Kate had recently mentioned that she found these really, really nice caves. And that Easter, Kate had even brought her father to one of the caves. And so her sister then went directly to the cave, found her shot dead with 2 revolvers by her side. And it turned out one revolver belonged to her father and the other one to her brother-in-law. And the one belonging to her brother-in-law had disappeared like 3 years before. Kate Cabin then was buried in Hickory Grove, and I don't know that this case was ever solved. I remember reading some things about it, and I don't want to mention because I don't about who they thought the suspects were, but from what I remember reading, it sounds like maybe it could have been, people close to the family. Iowa girl kills her father in 1900. Club used with fatal effects upon liquor-crazed parent. Henry Schaefer, age 60, frenzied with liquor Friday night, attempted to kill his wife and daughter. And so the daughter, hitting with a club, The mom drove to Bellevue, came back with the coroner, and the coroner's jury did exonerate the daughter. And this is the father shown in his Civil War uniform. W.F. Comer. On Monday afternoon at Maquoketa, while Colonel Comer was standing in the post office opening and reading letters, 6 men came in. They locked the door, and then they started beating him with clubs. He was knocked down and beaten so badly that his life is despaired of. So, I think that he died. I think that means he died. Life is despaired of. And so the postmaster who saw the attack cried murder, and citizens rushed in, and the whole crowd of ruffians were arrested. So the reason why they went after him, he was outspoken against liquor selling, and nearly all the people that beat him were saloon keepers. That appeared in the Troy Daily Times in New York. Chester Corral, man threatened mother-in-law. So I have several different slides to tell this story. So on May 12, 1920, Chester Corral, man threatening mother-in-law on a hunger strike. Chester Corral, jailed here after threatening to kill his mother-in-law, entered on the 14th day of a hunger strike, Wednesday. He refused to eat anything in protest against his incarceration. He believes that any remark made against a mother-in-law is legitimate. July 20th, 1920. Possible kidnapping or certain unjustified persuasion of Curtis Corral. So what he did was he turned his wife in, saying that she kidnapped their son. In reality, he was an abusive man, and she fled, for her life. 3 years later. So, the rage is like just building up with this man, because she never did go back to him. Newspaper headline: shoots former wife, her mother himself. Maquoketa, Iowa, April 30th, 1923. Chester Corral, 40, committed suicide here this morning after shooting his divorced wife and her mother, Mrs. George Gibson, at the latter's home. Corral went to the house and was met in the yard by his former mother-in-law. He fired one shot at her with a revolver, the bullet entering her temple. Going in the house, he shot his wife in the jaw and sent a bullet through his head, dying instantly. Mrs. Gibson is not expected to live. Mrs. Corral will recover. So a little bit about Chester Corral. When he was 12 years old and his brother was 10, they ran away from home, and they were raised by their older brother, Alva. And then Chester married Pearl Curtis in 1909, and they were the parents of 4 children. When Pearl was pregnant with the 3rd child, Robert, the 2nd boy, Vincent, came down with infantile paralysis. And so Pearl would walk all the way across town to the hospital. And so where she lived was somewhere, near the Lutheran church. And so I'm not sure where the hospital was that she would have walked to at that time, but clear across town, it said. And then it was after the little boy died, that is when she filed for divorce. And then they went to live with her mother and her stepfather after the divorce. So more about this tragedy. Now we're to 1923. The 2 women shot by fanatic have chance to live. Both will be crippled for life. Mr. Gibson, 80 years of age, was not expected to live last night due to the shock. So he was cared for in his home, and he was unable to rise from his bed. And I did find out that a few years later he did die from a stroke. So that was just too much for him. Corral crazed at the loss of the love of his wife, who divorced him and secured the custody of their 2 sons. And I think before I said there were 4, I think 1 child had already died. So now 2 died, and now there's 2 left. Surgeons said Mrs. Gibson would live if her heart action could be maintained. She had suffered for years with a weak heart. Her eye was going to be taken out the next morning. Then Mrs. Corral was in much more serious condition than they first expected, and facial paralysis was setting in. And they thought that, her recovery would take years for her to overcome. June 6th, Mrs. Carell left Tuesday, so she did recover, to attend summer school in Muscatine. Mrs. Carell was a primary teacher before her marriage, and she hopes to take up that work again. She received 3 gunshot wounds, and her arm and shoulder is still somewhat stiff, but she hopes to overcome much of that difficulty. Her mother suffered the loss of one eye as one of the bullets pierced the eyeball, and she suffered almost total loss of her sight, being able to distinguish only light from darkness, forms of objects appear in the shadow. It is hoped that perhaps a strong lens may help relieve the trouble slightly. So Pearl and her mother, Matilda, they later moved to California. Matilda did remarry and had another son. I'm saying Matilda, that's her sister, I think. Okay, so Matilda married, and then Pearl did remarry and had another son. And her mother lived with her and helped her raise the kids. And then later, the mother moved in with the other daughter. And so they stayed the remaining time in California. Now, Bonnie, you had mentioned something about there was a case where someone was killed, and you thought it was that same name, Pearl, where maybe they had gotten buried alive in a casket.
Right, so there was, but I think this was a young, not a child, but a young person.
Okay.
And she was, so the house is on Quarry Street. It's still standing. And there was, a child was buried in this casket, a child had died, was in the casket. They made her open the casket because they could hear, everybody said they could hear noises. And they opened the casket, the child was dead, but there were scratch marks. So evidently she wasn't dead when she was buried, and she had been scratched. So, but that was in the newspaper also, and you didn't see that.
I did not come across that at all. But I kept finding her in all these censuses with her mother. So
But her name was Pearl Gibbs.
Pearl. Her name was
Pearl.
Pearl. And then this one was Pearl too. Mr. and Mrs. Barger, the late horrible murder. Bellevue, September 26, 1854. Messrs. Swigert, sirs, I promise you that upon my arrival to this place, I would endeavor to place you before the particulars of the late murder of Mrs. Barger. But after consultation, it is thought best not to do so, for fear of prejudicing the public mind and thwarting the aim of true justice and making it difficult to obtain a jury. It appears that Mrs. Barger had applied for a divorce from her husband on the grounds of ill treatment and threats of her life, which divorce was granted at the last term of the district court, giving her right to the children, which Mr. Barger, he wanted the kids. On Saturday, prior to the murder, Mr. Kirkpatrick, with Mrs. Barger, went to the former resident of Barger after the children, and were to return on Sunday. Barger left Bellevue Sunday with a rifle and proceeded in the direction of Mr. Keister's for the purpose, it is supposed, of waylaying them. But as he returned by a different route, he was foiled in his attempt. He, however, returned to Bellevue during the night, secreted himself behind a close board fence facing the door of Mr. Kirkpatrick's, where Mrs. Barger then was, cutting a hole through the crack of the fence large enough to put his rifle. And upon her appearance at the door in the morning, he deliberately shot her right through the heart. So that was in the Maquoketa Sentinel, September 28, 1854. This is a different murder here. Elwood sisters fatally shot. Husband shoots wife and self and wounds sister, May 28, 1944. Maquoketans involved in gun fray Sunday at Cicero, Illinois. Frank Clothanet, 42, a precision tool grinder, shot and killed his estranged wife, Catherine, 29, wounded her sister, Mrs. Edna Barnes, age 26, and then shot himself. The two sisters were both daughters of Mr. and Mrs. P.L. Dell of Maquoketa. The shooting occurred in the Barnes apartment in Cicero, where Mrs. Clothanek had been living. She had separated from her husband 3 weeks ago and had filed for divorce, charging cruelty. So the double funeral was to be held at the Maquoketa Methodist for the girls. these girls, and more about this, Miss Edna Dell and Michael Barnes wed in Maquoketa in 1940. She was the youngest daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Dell. Let's see. The bride graduated in 1935 from the local high school and later completed a course in the Felt and Tarrant Comptometer School. Anybody know what that is? Comptometer. Must have been, sounds like a machine of some kind. For the last year, she's in, oh, here we go. I know what it is. For the last year, she has been employed with the Zenith Radio Corporation. So that would have had something to do with that, training to build radios, I suppose. Mr. Barnes is a graduate of Macmillan School, and he was employed by the International Register Company. And so it just, as this murder is taking place, it said, "This is it," he shouts. Michael Barnes, Mrs. Barnes' husband, told Lieutenant John Sherping of the police department that his brother-in-law appeared at the door of their basement apartment. So they probably were basement apartments. There probably wasn't a rear door. He pushed Barnes aside and drew out his revolver and ran inside. And he shouted, "This is it." He ran upstairs to the apartment. The man that, the woman that was killed, so her husband ran upstairs to the apartment. So evidently he was able to get out to try and get help. And then he heard several shots, and then he heard his wife scream. And so then when the police arrived, they were lying on the floor. His wife had been shot in the chest, the leg, the arm, and was pronounced dead at the hospital. And then her sister had bullet wounds in the abdomen and her left arms. And Edna and Michael Barnes, they'd only been married for 5 years. Now it does say, though, that at the time of her death, she was employed by Western Electric. John Walter Campbell testifies. So John Walter Campbell, he was born in Otter Creek in 1897. And then he went off to sea. And just to kind of shorten up a little bit, what I have written about this was he was on the ship and there were some men, they chased another man overboard. And so he and some other men were trying to get the captain to turn the boat around and rescue this man, and the captain refused. And I think it was because his son had something to do with it. And basically then this man from Otter Creek, he watched as this man died then because they wouldn't turn around. And I think they just picked up speed then, and he wasn't able to hang on anymore. He was hanging on to something in the water, a rope or something that was attached. And so, anyway, it sounds like after this happened, then just all hell broke loose on this ship, and people were beaten and so on. And so this John Walter then did testify, and I think that these people were, made to account for their crime. But it said that somebody declared every man on board for themselves, and they were being beaten with wire and razor straps and everything. Okay, so I've got several slides for this one. August 29, 1918. No clue to men who slew woman at Maquoketa. Husband passes a bad night. An inquest may be postponed until he gets better. So this is the husband of the woman that was murdered. The inquest over the body of Mrs. Guy Wilford was begun here at 1 p.m. Guy Wilford was brought from the hospital to testify regarding the encounter with the burglars. He and Velma Taylor are the principal witnesses. The inquiry will finish late today. So basically, he tells his tale about these men coming in to rob them and kill his wife and so on. And the person staying at the house, Velma Taylor, was visiting the Wilford home, and she was the niece, I believe. And anyway, she was sleeping upstairs and was awakened by the shots. So they had had a detectives come and, trying to figure out this case. Well, then I find the last article. Guy Wilford, it is announced today, confessed last night to county attorney that he murdered his wife. That his story of a struggle with burglars was false. This is a photo that was taken at his brother's wedding in 1907. And his wife, whom he killed at 32 years of age. Wilford died in prison in 1931 at age 43. And he died kind of a horrible death with illness that he had. Mary Clark was born about 1830, the daughter of William and Margaret. By the time her future husband was 4 years old, he was living in Dubuque. In 1854, Mary Clark married Robert McGinty, who was born in Canada in about 1828. They both died later that year, and it was listed as a murder-suicide. And she may be buried in Emmeline Hickory Grove. Now, there's a lot of different versions of this event. So one event, by Iowa City newspaper, says that Robert McGinty went to his father-in-law's house in Cascade in pursuit of his wife, who had fled from his abuse. And in an attempt to assault her, McGinty killed his ex-father-in-law, or seriously wounded his ex-father-in-law. And then his wife escaped to a neighbor's house. But then he was able to, then she fled from the neighbor's house, and the neighbor, he was going to kill the neighbor, and she pointed which way she went, and then he was able to find her and kill her. And so part of the killing, how it tells about what he did, there's so much to read here, but anyway, he did end up cutting her, decapitating her. But then there's another account of this in the Davenport newspaper. And it says, McGinty's Bluff in Whitewater Township, Dubuque County, is affirmed to be the place where Mr. McGinty's when he first encountered disaster. He became huffed at his wife about something, murdered the whole family, went over the bluff, and jumped over. So I don't think that happened. But, that was just a rumor then that started where that. Samuel Hicks for attempted murder. So this man, he was beating his wife, and I'm just trying to shorten this up because otherwise we're going to be short on time here. He went over to Miles to ask his wife if she would come back with him. And upon her saying no, he said, well, then I'm going to kill you. And he withdrew a revolver out of his pocket and fired. And the ball grazed her dress on the shoulder, and then she started to run out the back door. She was followed by the infuriated husband. He fired 5 more shots. And another one passed through her dress, but it didn't hit her body. And she was screaming and screaming. So they rescued her. Some neighboring farmers came to her relief and rescued her. So actually this is just attempted murder. He actually was not able to kill her.
Is there a name?
His name was Samuel Hicks, who was arrested. But it does not tell what her name is. And that was in the Maquoketa, July 21st, 1868. I shut mine off and it still rings. Why? From the Cedar Rapids Gazette, October 13th, 1891. William Smitterson, a German, living 8 miles north of town, shot his wife Saturday, blowing off the lower part of her face. It is thought the woman will live. He is a notorious fellow, having some years ago been arrested for illicit distilling, and more recently for bigamy, and still more recently for brutality to his wife. He is now under arrest, and such is the indignation among the Germans especially, that summary vengeance is not improbable. You know, I kept thinking that we're running out of time, and now I noticed a lot of those are blank slides at the end, so we're going to finish okay. Tries to do murder, Molenter. Vicious attack made at St. Donatus upon a sleighing party. Bellevue, December 30th, 1897. So this sleighing party, they were coming back from a relative's house, and this man just comes out and is yielding a knife. He cut one of the men's nose off and just almost severed his jugular vein. And the man that he shot was this, or that he used the knife on, was the man in the picture here, which is Gus Felderman. And so I think he survived, because I did find a Gus Felderman that would be about that age. And that is the end. And you know, for some